Hello, Ivy Podcast listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I am your host, Angela Alberti. Very excited to interview Josh Smith today. We're going to get more of a rundown on him and all of the insight that he's going to be bringing on today's episode. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everyone to go ahead and rate and review our podcast when you get the chance. Go into your iTunes store, give us a rating, let us know your feedback. It helps us get in front of more listeners at a global scale like yourself. So thank you once again for listening. Let's go ahead and get started. Joshua, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. And, 5-star review based on my interactions with you so far. So
Awesome. Thanks.
Joshua Smith. I am the Senior Vice President of Advantage XPO. Advantage XPO is the strategic solutions arm of the Staffmart Group, a $2 billion mixed staffing organization in the U.S. owned by Recruit Holdings out of Tokyo, Japan. The Advantage XPO brand is most notably known for our delivery of managed service programs, recruitment process outsourcing programs, and business process outsourcing programs. So anything and everything strategic with regard to external hiring best practices falls into our wheelhouse. And I've been with the organization for 17 years and lead North American delivery in the US and Canada. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Everything that you said is really music to my ears. I think we're both kind of contingent workforce geeks, and everything that comes to managing and properly overseeing that external workforce. That's exactly what we're going to be covering in today's episode. But let's talk about MSP, RPO, BPO. I mean, we are living in an industry that loves itself a good acronym. We know that, right? But can you break us down to how you would define what an MSP and an RPO is to the audience out there that isn't necessarily enthralled into the world of external work and talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 parts, right? So we're talking about the talent ecosystem as a whole, right? And
right.
Traditionally, people associate external hiring as traditionally contingent, but there are really two sides to how a company can engage external talent. So managed service programs. Managed service programs traditionally focus on hiring external talent on a contingency basis, whether that be 1099, W-2, statement of or payroll, employer of record types of engagements. And most notably here recently, we've just seen a big demand for that. And so I think managed service programs have been around for a decade and a half, maybe 2. They've certainly evolved over that period of time. Originally, they were really focused on large global conglomerates, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 organizations that had massive amounts of contingent workforce spend. And what we've seen over the past 5 years is really a paradigm shift in how organizations engage external talent and what mechanism they use to do that most successfully to build efficiency and scale. And that is MSP, managed service programs. On the other side of the equation for the ecosystem is recruitment process outsourcing. And in recruitment process outsourcing, that is essentially outsourcing a piece of a function or an entire function of your external full-time hiring process.
Mm-hmm.
In RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, organizations will look to hitch their wagon to a external strategic partner that will align to their internal talent acquisition strategies and manage a portion or a process in its entirety. And that can really be from requisition creation through offer and onboarding. It can be small pieces of that process between start and finish. Most organizations that look at RPO are looking at opportunities to maximize scale, efficiency, and also to leverage the best practices and expertise of recruiters in the industry.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was an awesome breakdown, and I think that really simplifies the approach. And it all comes down to unique ways to manage your contingent, your external workforce. You mentioned something that I just want to elaborate a little bit more on. And it's interesting to me because oftentimes I'm in the same space, and when I speak to staffing agency owners or recruiters, or even on the other side on enterprise level roles, my my experience and my conversations with them is usually equates to the bigger the enterprise, the bigger the company, the more likely they are to have an MSP in place. But you said that there's really been another trend happening within the last 5 years that changes the makeup of what type of company could benefit from an MSP. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more so that the audience knows, truly what kind of company would benefit from that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, because I think this is a very important question and one that um, that deserves a lot of discussion. And so what we've seen, and there's a lot of publications out there. There's many industry analysts. Probably one of the leaders is Staffing Industry Analyst, and each year they publish a landscape survey for managed service programs and recruitment process outsourcing programs. And so recently they published the 2020 Managed Service Program Landscape Survey. And what we're seeing progressively year over year is that number one, the number in terms of percentage of new MSP contracts that are awarded to first-time consumers of MSP is really at an all-time high. And in fact, it's rivaling that of second gen and third generation MSP iterations.
Wow.
The other side, which I think really feeds to your question, is the percentage of programs that are actually coming on board as new managed service programs with lower spend thresholds. And historically, as you mentioned early on, Angela, most people associate, I don't need an MSP because we only spend X amount of dollars, or I don't think we spend enough to have an MSP. The reality is that MSP is for organizations of all shape and sizes, right? And so, in fact, last year, nearly 70% of awarded MSP programs under contract were under $50 million in spend. And of that, the majority were single country utilization. So in this case, yes. So what we're seeing is that there are more and more adopters of managed service programs. Organizations spending less than 10 million represented almost 30% of the contracts awarded in place for managed service programs. And so that is drastically different than what the expectation or understanding of MSP programs has been historically. And so I think this signals a shift in the way that organizations are looking at best practices to engage their external talent base. And we'll continue to see a sign of that. Our business, Advantage XPO, we tend to focus on the small to mid-sized buyers. So we're targeting 10 million to 50 million in contingent workforce spend, external hiring, and that can be through SOW, through recruited talent, through payroll, and through 1099. And we're also, we're focused on single country origin. Although we're a global entity, we know there's a tremendous amount of consumption of MSP services in the US, and there's still a lot of work to do. And so I just think it represents the direction of, I believe, where our industry is headed, and the fact that there's going to be a technological play that comes with how companies engage their external talent pool. And that's one of the other added benefits, Angela, of managed service programs is traditionally with the engagement of a managed service program comes a technology platform that acts as a system of record that creates clarity, gives visibility, and control to the buyers and business stakeholders to really understand the ebbs and flows of their external contingent workforce. Because most times in those first generation environments where you've got a very decentralized and unmanaged process, you've got multiple agency contracts that are on different papers and multiple rates and terms and conditions. It's very difficult to pinpoint what the true ROI is for the money that you're spending. So we bring order to chaos, and that's really our objective. We focus on driving cost compliance. We work to mitigate risk, and we work to really optimize the supply chain to ensure that, number one, efficiency is built into the modeling, and really that you're getting the return on investment that you're looking for that really helps drive your contingent workforce to operate in concert with your operational strategies and initiatives. And then lastly, we're always striving for innovation and continuous improvement. And so looking at continuous cost savings, continuous points of optimization, and performance improvement. And that's something that many organizations really latch onto. And I think once you become an MSP consumer, it's very hard to go back to the way you did it before.
Yeah, I think it's nearly impossible. And I love that overview because it really is so vastly different from what my connotation has been within the MSP space. It really is changing and evolving, and that typical consumer profile is not what it was even just 7 years ago, maybe. It's probably rapidly changing as quickly as the world of work is around us. But you bring a different set of insight and experience to this because you've lived the life on both ends. You've lived the life as a supplier. You've living the life now, as the RPO and the MSP provider. So, when the MSP came into play into the staffing industry, I think it really throttled the world. So I'd love to hear your insight, just to speak candidly, because we know that within a staffing agency or within the staffing space itself, the MSP came in with a certain level of notoriety. And all of a sudden, it's this guy that's now going to take over and call the shots and run the program. So what are some of the differentiators that you think can align more synergy between the supplier and the MSP provider so that all parties are working in unison to create this beautiful external workforce ecosystem that's needed to have a company thrive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And fortunately for me, coming up through the traditional staffing ranks, I did have an opportunity to participate in a large number of managed service programs. And some of my best experiences and some of my worst experiences came down to communication.
Right.
I think that there's a reluctance and a kind of a fear and reservation for staffing companies to join MSPs because they feel like they're losing that element of control. They feel like, hey, my relationship is going to be taken away. I've got a very strong relationship with a certain buyer or hiring manager. I don't want to lose that. And so they tend to become fearful. And what I want to impart and share with suppliers is that our goal is to help make you successful. At the end of the day, we act as kind of a broker between the supplier. And it's our job to ensure that we're finding the very best talent at the right price to meet the needs of the business. And we want to make sure that we're driving relationships across all party lines. And so I think one of the biggest things that I can say to suppliers is find an MSP, find a couple of MSPs, try them out. It's like a blind date, right? Understand about what's their supplier rationalization process, what's their supplier outreach communication measurement process, how do they incent their provider or their suppliers for key performance? If you've got a supplier that's doing really well in one program, what's your internal metric of measurement to make sure that you're taking that supplier from program 1 and giving opportunity in program 2, 3, and 4, where they can continue to leverage that best practice? I think that not all MSPs are the same. Many are really, really good at what I call the experience, and I believe XPO is one of those organizations that holds a high degree of creating legendary service. And when I say legendary service, Angela, I mean that you create an experience for someone through something that is memorable and it keeps them coming back, right? And so that legendary service, that legendary experience to our suppliers is what keeps them coming back. It's what keeps them engaged and motivated to participate in XPO programs. And at the end of the day, they help keep us successful in the eyes of our customers and keep the business lines open.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I'm often, in my everyday working life at my base pay, I'm on the front lines with the staffing agencies, working them through the nuances of a new MSP. And I love what you've mentioned. It really comes down to that clear communication, that intention to be an enhancer, not an inhibitor. So I know that a lot of agencies out there it's music to their ears as much as it is to mine.
And if I could add one more thing,
Sure.
I don't like to reflect on last year. No one does, because it was
right.
the year that everybody.
2020?
Yeah,
what happened
exactly.
in 2020?
Yeah,
Okay.
just short-term memory. I'll take it for this situation.
Right.
But I will say that another great thing about partnering with an MSP is because we manage the entire ecosystem, we swing kind of a larger strategic hammer when it comes to discussions about wages and incentives. And last year, we worked very closely with all of our customers in our MSP portfolio to ensure that we had a compelling argument and reason and justification through data and analytics to share with our customers to ensure that we were able to position jobs that were paid competitively. There was a lot of incentive that was created last year that was kind of counterproductive to return to work. And so we had to come up with concepts and ideas because there was still work to get done. How do we get people into the buildings, into the facilities to get the work done? And so we advocate for our suppliers each and every day. If we're having challenges with process, if we're having challenges with hiring criteria, if we're having challenges with pay rates because they're below a market midpoint, then we're going to be advocating on your behalf to ensure that we're educating the end customer on what the right decision is to make. And we're going to be guiding and leading that through data and your feedback. And I think that because we're managing the entire ecosystem, that gives us a louder voice and probably more of a strategic insight to those end users to make those decisions happen. And so very different than being an independent staffing organization of many organizations supporting a company and trying to one-off conversations, because we're doing it holistically and we're doing it for the entire enterprise.
And that's absolutely critical, I think, especially considering the times that we're in right now. So thank you for that. That's that consultative approach, that insight that's going to attract, and you hear it often. It was the war on talent. Now it's the war on retention. And it solidifies and it creates this foundation that makes that process so much more successful for what is a supplier when they have that insight and that assistance from the get-go. But now let's take it into another direction. You mentioned an organization that I'm a huge fan of. I mentioned it already, Staffing Industry Analysts. And as any person who is an avid reader of their publications and all of the information that they throw out there, and even really anyone that's within the talent ecosystem space this year, we know that one of the trending topics is what is direct sourcing and direct sourcing implementation programs. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the direct sourcing movement and when you think a company is in a position to consider it. So let me know what you think about the whole direct sourcing trend that's happening right now.
Boy, that's the buzzword of 2021.
It totally is, right?
But you know what? I think direct sourcing is really indicative of the transition and transformation of what's happening in the industry, which is a blending of technology and human capital.
Right.
So for me, direct sourcing is the next logical step, the next iteration of how service providers can deliver value to strategic customers. And through the direct sourcing avenue, whether it be for contingent or for full-time, it's really allowing organizations to leverage their brand, right? And to incorporate their brand into the hiring process. It allows organizations to create a seamless candidate experience, whether you're hiring for external full-time talent or for contingent talent. You engage resources, one and the same, through the same process, through the same high touch, high quality type of experience. And I think that the difference between traditional direct sourcing and, say, a supplier taking on a role and providing you talent in consideration for that opportunity is you're able to universalize and kind of streamline the messaging externally. A direct line of communication to the potential employee where you can leverage your brand and you can really drive the value statement of what comes with the opportunity, and don't have to worry about that becoming diluted by different agencies providing different messaging to the marketplace for candidates in consideration for your opportunities. And so I think that there's really two parts of direct sourcing. There's the technology piece, which is the platform. Many of the VMS providers are looking at direct sourcing avenues through either enterprise partnerships or through building their own direct sourcing modeling that acts as a kind of bolt-on to the traditional VMS platforming that would manage your third-party suppliers, your pay bill functions, et cetera. And that is ultimately referred to as kind of tier 0, where direct sourcing is your first line of outreach, looking to drive candidates into a process and engage them with managers before it ever goes out to any kind of supplier base. The direct sourcing to organizations outside of the fact that, again, they can leverage their brand and really control that value statement or value proposition is oftentimes it comes at a lower cost rate, right? So through direct sourcing channels, you can save 2 to 3% on average on a traditional recruited markup rate. And you're able to captivate a larger target audience because, again, it's a customer facing type of engagement, and you're not going through a third party advocate or supplier. So it tends to open up those recruiting pipelines. The other part of direct sourcing, aside from the technology, is the curation. And so, with direct sourcing, the real goal is to look at how do you build private talent pools, right, for organizations so that they can take on more of a proactive recruitment approach versus a reactive approach, and that here comes the job, now let me go find the candidate. Talent pools, private talent pools, and that curation process would enable an organization to have a pre-established talent pool of vetted, qualified, assessed talent that are ready to be submitted. And those individuals are built out in specific cadence to whatever jobs you may be looking to target that direct sourcing channel. Because I do want to clarify that direct sourcing is not, at this stage in the game, is not right for every job, right? So you don't want direct sourcing for your purple squirrels. You don't want direct sourcing for those jobs that your best recruiter can't fill. Direct sourcing is really something that you should look at, number one, a mature program, right? So if you're a first generation consumer of MSP, direct sourcing isn't right to introduce in the inception, simply because if you remember, generation, you're trying to bring order to chaos. And so you're creating the building blocks of what is best practice, how do you create kind of a core criteria for how you want to manage your external workforce, sprinkling in direct sourcing as an additional value stream that early on in the game is probably going to have limited adoption. And so as a practice, first and foremost, you want to make sure that your program is mature. So I would say 12 months into a program is probably a good time to start looking at how do you incorporate direct sourcing as a channel into your ecosystem and talent stream. The other big thing is no major changes looking to occur from a technology standpoint, from a process standpoint. You want to make sure that it's somewhat steady state and that you've got stakeholder buy-in and adoption, and that the managers are open to the concept of direct sourcing. It comes through education, right? Because direct sourcing to anyone that doesn't know it really means nothing. And so the other thing that's really important about direct sourcing is understanding the type of job that direct sourcing is good for. And that's really geographically, I think, condensed, right? You want to make sure that, in my opinion, and I think there's probably different schools of thought on this, but direct sourcing is best served for areas of the organization where you have high concentrations of contingent labor, where you have highly repeatable roles. I would say that direct sourcing, one area that it's not quite as strong in today, I think light industrial is a bit lagging in terms of success with direct sourcing compared to more of the professional IT ranks. But I do believe that there's a real initiative to find the magic formula for incorporating direct sourcing into that light industrial population as that segmentation continues to grow. But high concentrations of contingent workforce in a single site or regional location is probably the best start to pilot a direct sourcing campaign, and then to just look at your key profiles throughout the organization. Because again, the goal here is to create pipelines of talent so that you can proactively recruit in advance of jobs coming down the pipeline. And you've got an opportunity to engage talent, to assess talent, and to have them ready to work when the job comes through. And I think that's going to be the largest benefit of the technology platform and the right curation partner who really understands what it takes to do that for a company. And not everybody is capable of doing that because it is a very high touch, very highly engaged process. And at the end of the day, they're representing your brand. And you want to make sure that they don't dilute that brand and they don't do any service to that brand, because the name of the game is how do you leverage your employer brand to drive a larger concentration of attraction to your business.
Awesome. That was fantastic. And it all comes down to the proper enablement of talent pool curation. That, I think, is at the essence of what is direct sourcing. So if you are a company that has a large light industrial trade circuit with a newly launched MSP 6 months to inception and a technology platform that's looking to be rolling out in the next couple of months, you're probably not the best candidate for what is a direct sourcing strategy. But wonderful overview. And I think that really breaks down because oftentimes when things start to trend, I think it's just one size fits all, but it truly isn't. It is, taking it another step and really analyzing when it does not make sense. So awesome. Next question and final question. The future of work, that's another buzzword. I think this podcast episode is full of them. But in your opinion, I love asking this question. What does that mean to you? What does the future of work truly mean to Joshua Smith?
Boy, that's an exciting question. And in fact, it's one that I think about every day. As a strategic leader and business unit leader, part of the executive council for Staff Mark Group, it's something that we as a leadership group talk about daily. Last year, I was actually tapped by our CEO, Gino Catolo. Mm-hmm. And this was shortly after the pandemic, and where we really saw that there was going to be, everybody really had an idea that things would return to kind of a pre-pandemic state, but it would look and feel completely different than it was prior to March and April of 2020. And so I was tapped on the shoulder by Gino Catolo, our CEO, and he'd asked me to lead a future state task force. And that future state task force was really to identify how do we deliver value in a post-COVID world. Right. The value streams that we need to look at, how do we need to change in a business, understanding there are no sacred cows here. And just because we've done something some way for an extended period of time does not mean that we are locked in on that particular process as a best practice going forward. And so I pulled in about 20 individuals from our organization, field leadership, senior leadership, executive leadership, from corporate shared services, from field operations, really to have representation of our entire organization. And we formed subcommittees. And through that, we went on a 10-week journey of identifying opportunities in our business to change and evolve the way that we engage talent and deliver value to our customers. And I'm proud to say that through that journey, we did identify a large number of opportunities that it wasn't just like, hey, here's what we think about. There was a lot of meat behind it. So there was a lot of meat and thought behind it. We down selected 8 of the initiatives, and I'm happy to say that of those 8, nearly all of them are either implemented or under construction at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And every single one of them is going to be disruptive to the business. Every single one of them is going to help us drive efficiency and deliver value. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what the future of work means to me. The future of work is how can we help organizations in a post-COVID world? We are in such a unique situation. I don't think people are ever going to want to go back to work and not have slippers on their feet, right? I mean,
wearing them right now.
The world of remote work is here to stay, and
absolutely,
that's okay. And from a recruiting standpoint, I think organizations may have the tendency to be concerned about that, but I think about the freedom that gives an organization. Freedom gives an organization to say, I can find people anywhere in the world to support my business, because I'm not requiring them to be at a desk in Sacramento, California. They can be anywhere in the world to do the work that I need them to do. And so I think that the future of work for me is organizations are really going to look at how do we partner up with somebody who can help strategically advise us on the best way to meet the needs of our business in a future state? And because we've already been through that internally, because that's really, our focus is disruption, right? We are owned by an organization that owns Indeed.com, one of the largest disruptors of the HR tech space in history, leader in what they do. And one of our key initiatives is innovation and synergy between HR and technology. And so we are making massive efforts to disrupt and to change the way that the industry works and to change the way that people and jobs are brought together. And so I think it's going to be a nice balance between technology and human capital. I am that technology will never displace human action because I feel like we need this. And
100%. I couldn't agree more with you. They talk about AI and what it's going to do and how that's going to impact, but this in the end is a human capital business, right?
Exactly. But I think, where organizations can shift is how do they incorporate AI and machine learning,
Yes.
Different processes to offload some of the non-core functional types of elements of the job. So onboarding, offboarding, candidate communication, automating technology into your stack that allows your recruiters to spend more time talking with people. And
right.
And, being creative, being open to changing the way that you've historically always done things, opening up your horizons and your interest in doing things differently, looking at, gig workforce, looking at, full-time hiring, looking at a variety of different outfits and opportunities so that you can have a well-rounded talent ecosystem. And it doesn't have to start that way, Angela. I think the first thing is to really understand what is your vision and how do you envision contingent workforce helping you to accomplish that. I think contingent workforce is a segment that will continue to grow, especially coming off of a year like last year. Companies just realize that they need scale, and we scale. We are the individuals that come in and provide that scale to flex up, to flex down, and do that on behalf of our client companies, really relieving them of that stress and liability because that becomes our workflow, not theirs. And today, our goal and our agreements with our customers, our delivery is 100% fulfillment. And how we do that, the cadence in which we deliver that is based on our expertise, our supplier relationships, our best practices, our technology, our innovation, all of the things. And I think that's going to be something that will be a mainstay and a huge factor as we look at what the next 5 years in our business looks like.
Vastly different. Efficiencies driven by and enhanced with technology to handle global workforces and truly disrupting and opening up the horizons and considering new ways to find and deliver that talent. That is fantastic, Joshua. That was wonderful overview. And I think from the start to finish, you really wrapped up everything that is at the essence of what the future of work is. Now that we're wrapping up our podcast, which makes me a little bit sad because I feel like I could just listen to all of the insight that you bring to us and individuals within the industry. How can we get a hold of you? How can we contact you? And do you have any closing remarks?
Yes. So I would encourage anybody that's listening to this podcast, if something that Angela and I have shared has caught your attention or caused a light bulb in your head to go off, you can certainly reach out to me, joshua.smith@advantagexpo.com. You can also check out our website, advantagexpo-us.com. I would say that stay the course. I think that it's been a hard year. It's been a hard months. It was so sweet to see the recovery begin late last year. But I know how hard it is for recruiters, for our suppliers, to get the job done. There's so many, for the first time in history, we've got so many more jobs than we have people available. And we're seeing a slight improvement there. But my words of encouragement would be just stay the course because, there is nothing sweeter than working hard and to see you meet that end goal and that end result. And if your result is to grow your business, if your result is to increase the number of opportunities you have to put great talent to work, and MSP is a great avenue and platform to do that, I would encourage you to explore it. If you're a buyer of contingent workforce or external hiring, and you haven't considered MSP or RPO in the past because you feel like you don't fit the mold or the profile, I hope that you've learned today that the traditional norms and associations with RPO and MSP are being broken down. And I believe that there's no harm in a conversation. And I would love to talk to you if you've got questions. I've got a great team of resources that would also be happy to have those conversations as well. Angela, you are great. I know you are a wonderful industry practitioner, and I'm that you could and would do the same
Absolutely.
So I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I think the more we can educate the community, our networks, the more informed we can be as practitioners and buyers of strategic solutions, the better we can be at changing the world. And so I appreciate this time, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, Angela.
I have as well, and it's all about changing and putting people to work at the end of the day, which can be vastly complex, but you broke it down into a level that I think resonates with so many of us out there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for walking us through what you guys do, and also thank you for our listeners for tuning into today's episode. It has been an absolute pleasure, Joshua, and I will check you guys out on the next one. Thanks, everyone.